Up in East Lansing, it has been a strange couple of months, years, I guess, even. Michigan State is a program that's made it to the college football playoff. They have tradition, they have resources, and they've had a very solid roster at their disposal. Of course, Mel Tucker being fired for cause earlier this season, and it's left the program, at least to my eyes, as someone who doesn't cover them day in day out, listless and in search of an identity. So, I guess first, before we get to the new coaching hire and the future of this program, tell me about the last couple of months as Michigan State has tried to finish this season. Like, where are we? Where is the new coaching staff taking over this program from?
I wrote a column on this after the Penn State loss, so about a week and a half ago.
Mhm.
But the new coaching staff, I put it like this: the new coaching staff is walking into a house where the Michigan State program represents the house where it just got ravaged by a tornado. Yeah, there's still some pieces in there, like maybe this family picture is still not broken, the foundation of the house is still up, uh, but everything's torn apart, and they just have to come in and rebuild. So the pieces are there. Michigan State has some young talent. Mel Tucker did a decent job recruiting, especially down south. He went into Florida, went into Georgia a little bit, got some decent talent that's currently on the roster and hasn't entered the portal as of now. So there's some young talent. The resources are there, like you said, and the coaching staff needs to do a good job of kind of rekindling those Ohio ties recruiting, because that's what Mel Tucker really lacked, was going into Ohio and recruiting Ohio, because there's a lot of talent in Ohio. Ohio is a football rich state. So Smith, I think one of his priorities needs to be going into Ohio and getting those recruits. Uh, as far as like the team this season that we saw, I think Harlan Barnett, the intern coach, his main job was to keep this team together. And I think only 3 or 4 guys, because there was a 30-day window to enter the portal for the players after Mel Tucker was fired. I think only 3 or 4 guys actually entered that portal, which was much less than everyone was expecting.
Mhm.
So I think Barnett did a really good job of keeping the team together. And I think that's kind of going to carry over into the Jonathan Smith era.
Talking with Brendan Moore of Spartan Rivals here on this episode, and Brendan, you look at Jonathan Smith coming over from Oregon State, did a tremendous job for the Beavers, their first 10-win season in program history. He got four-star recruits back up to Corvallis for the first time in a little bit. And it feels like he's really only kind of being pushed out the door by the Pac 12 drama and the loss of a conference. And yet, Michigan State is poised to benefit from an up and coming coach who is known to be a player first guy, someone who united a locker room, really built the culture. What do you see as his first steps that he needs to take? What are his top priorities upon now arriving at Michigan State, I guess a week or two ago, and heading into the portal and signing day?
Yeah, college football head coach is not an easy job, and Jonathan Smith, I think, is probably learning that right now. Uh, but because I mean, you mentioned it, the transfer portal. This roster is still pretty depleted. Yeah, I mentioned some of the young talent, but the depth is not there.
Mhm.
So he can get that a little bit through the portal. I know he's recruiting the portal right now pretty heavily, rekindling some of those Ohio ties. He's doing that right now. Uh, He's also getting back in contact with some recent Michigan State decommits, like Anthony Carey, who's a 4-star running back, I believe from Florida. So he's kind of getting back into contact with some of those decommits, getting in contact with current Michigan State commits to make sure they don't decommit,
Mhm.
continuing to kind of re-recruit the current guys on the team. So he's got a lot at hand. I know early signing day is coming up later this month. Transfer portal window's already open, so he's got a lot on the table here. But as of now, I do think he's doing a good job, because Nick Marsh, who's the 4-star receiver, I think the highest rated recruit or commit in Michigan State's 2024 class, he said he's locked in with Michigan State, and he met with Smith. He's coming up for an official visit, I believe, this upcoming weekend. So Nick Marsh, one of the high priority recruits for Michigan State, he committed during Mel Tucker's Mel Tucker era. So I think Smith's doing a great job of kind of rekindling those and kind of starting relationships with the current Michigan State commits, and then kind of rekindling the relationships with the Michigan State decommits.
Mhm. I want to get back to the portal and signing day in just a minute, especially with regards to what that roster could look like, what you're hearing as far as guys that Smith might be targeting, especially out of the portal, in just a second. But I mentioned Smith created an identity at Oregon State. The Big Ten is about to change in ways that we haven't seen on the college football landscape in decades, right? With Pac 12 schools coming over and the heavy hitters at that: Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. What is Michigan State's identity either going to be, or what does it need to be, in your estimation, in this new Big Ten?
Yeah. So Smith mentioned this in his I don't know if it was his introductory press conference or he met with the kind of media members after. He said that Michigan State needs to be a blue collar place, and he's kind of a blue collar guy. I mean, Michigan State is mostly developmental program. When you look at them under Mark D'Antonio, they weren't recruiting a ton of 5 stars and 4 stars. They were getting 3 stars, guys no one else wanted, and developing them into high quality players, starters at the Big Ten level, not just the Big Ten level, but Big Ten championship level. They won multiple championships under Mark D'Antonio. I know Smith and D'Antonio have been talking a lot. Uh, so I think Smith kind of wants to replicate what D'Antonio did. Obviously, he wants to recruit at a high level, but Michigan State, they're just not going to recruit at the same level as maybe an Ohio State or a Penn State or some of these other teams that are joining the Big Ten, like a USC or an Oregon. So Smith knows that. Smith's going to get his fair share of 3 stars. He might get some 4 stars in there as well. But this is going to be a place where it's going to be a developmental program for the most part, and that's fine. I mean, you see a ton of developmental programs throughout the country. He did it at Oregon State. You see a ton of developmental programs throughout the country that are successful pretty much in each conference. So, I mean, Smith, he's going to carry over that identity he established at Oregon State as well. He's bringing over a ton of his guys from the coaching staff. I think you can expect to see great offensive line play, great running game, and a hard-nosed defense. I think that's the identity Michigan State had in the past under D'Antonio, and they want to kind of rekindle that under Smith.
Mhm. To me, and listen, I'm a fan. I'm a grad of a program that I think also needs to get back to some developmental roots, right? In Texas A&M, is time is a flat circle. Everything is cyclical. With the rise of the recruiting services, specifically in the 5 star culture and the sizzle that everyone chases on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it now, do you think that we're going to see kind of a shift back to developmental programs having some sort of edge or being sought out instead of all of the glitz and the glam of 5 star, or is that maybe just kind of wishful thinking on my part?
No, I think that's a very good point. I mean, I can kind of compare this to kind of just the styles that some of these teams are playing. I mean, you look throughout the country, you see, high flying air raid offenses, spread the guys out, slinging all over the yard. But you look at Georgia and Michigan and maybe Bama as well. You look at some of these teams, they're kind of reverting back to just ground and pound and will wear you out in the trenches. So I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying. And Mel Tucker in during his reign as Michigan State head coach, you saw a lot of that glitz and glamour. He was taking photos on the field with recruits with 5 Ferraris or whatever on the field, big chains and stuff. So I think that was not what the identity, do it his way. That's just not what Michigan State is. That's probably what Michigan State will never be. So I do think you're going to see some more kind of developmental programs, less glitz and glamour, I think is how you described it. So yeah, I do think that's a good point. I think you could start seeing that. I mean, you saw it at Oregon State with Jonathan Smith. I think Michigan State could be that next program.
Gracious him. How about